Kazunari is a high school student whose middle school years were pretty bleak. He wants to leave all of that behind and spend his high school life in peace. One day, he walks to the library with a book in hand, hoping that someday he can have a kind and gentle girlfriend. While there, he notices a girl quietly reading by herself. Her name is Ritsu, and she is exactly the kind of person he hopes to be with. When their eyes meet, Kazunari immediately blushes. As he is absorbed in looking for books, Tagami suddenly calls out to him and asks him to finish their assignment quickly so they can head home. Tagami admits that he is jealous of Kazunari, who is starting to live alone because his parents have moved to another city. He also asks about the boarding house Kazunari will be staying in. Kazunari explains that the previous tenant had some issues and already moved out. Kazunari is not picky. He just wants a fresh start and some freedom. That afternoon, he walks toward his new boarding house. The area is filled with old buildings, giving off a calm and peaceful atmosphere. Suddenly, he runs into a strange man who is sticking his head through a hole in a fence. Kazunari panics, but the man notices him and calls out to him by name. Kazunari is confused about how the man knows who he is. Not long after, a police officer shows up and says there has been a report about a suspicious man behaving inappropriately around young children. The man looks confused, but Kazunari points him out anyway. The man denies the accusation, insisting that anyone would be curious enough to peek through a hole in a fence. Strangely, the police officer seems to agree, comparing it to simple human curiosity like playing with a rolling cart or adjusting a chair while sitting. Kazunari cannot believe the officer is thinking that way. The officer then explains that public safety for children has been a growing concern lately. Before the officer becomes more suspicious, the man quickly clarifies that while he may have odd thoughts, he has no interest in children. He casually adds that he would rather spend time sitting around at a train station. He also mentions that he does not intend to bother anyone, although he sometimes ends up drawing attention unintentionally. The officer decides to take him to the station for further questioning. Taking advantage of the situation, Kazunari quietly slips away, even as the strange man continues calling out to him. He runs all the way to the Kawaii boarding house. There he is greeted by a middle-aged woman who invites him inside. Kazunari is still puzzled about how the man knew his name, but he tries to push the whole incident out of his mind. The woman introduces herself as Sumiko, the landlady. She leads Kazunari to his room and apologizes for the building's old appearance. Kazunari does not mind, as he thinks it is actually quite decent. When he steps into the room, he is surprised by how spacious it looks, even though it is supposed to be small. Sumiko then pulls back a curtain, revealing the actual size of the room. Suddenly, the strange man appears behind Kazunari and pats him on the shoulder. Kazunari screams in shock. It turns out that the man named Shizuru lives in the same boarding house. Kazunari finally learns that Shizuru knows his name because Sumiko told him and showed him Kazunari's photo. To make matters worse, Shizuru's room is right next to his, separated only by a thin curtain. Kazunari feels uneasy about living so close to someone like him. Sumiko explains that Kazunari just does not know Shizuru well yet and insists that he is actually a friendly person, even if he can be a bit unusual. She describes him as someone who can be selfless, although he also has some eccentric tendencies. Kazunari, however, feels that Shizuru might be trouble. Shizuru, on the other hand, seems oddly touched by Sumiko's comments. Kazunari begins to think that he should not get involved with people like them. In fact, he even considers that going back to his difficult middle school days might be better than staying there. He decides to refuse the room and plans to stay at a friend's house for the night instead. As he prepares to leave, Kazunari reflects on his dream of having a peaceful high school life and finding a kind and smart girlfriend, but the moment he opens the door, he unexpectedly runs into Ritsu. His face turns red as he sees her standing right in front of him. Sumiko and Shizuru greet Ritsu as she returns home. Kazunari wonders if this is some kind of sign or just a strange coincidence. Sumiko tells Ritsu that Kazunari will be staying at the Kawaii boarding house. Nervously, Kazunari stumbles over his words as he greets her. Shizuru tries to introduce himself again, but Kazunari is not interested. Ritsu calmly introduces herself instead. Sumiko then mentions that Ritsu goes to the same high school as Kazunari. He is shocked to realize that he might end up living under the same roof as the girl he admires. Kazunari then points out that they actually saw each other earlier at the library. Kazunari tried to start a conversation with Ritsu and kept following her, but she suddenly stopped him and pointed out that he had crossed into the women's area. Sumiko explained that the boarding house had clearly separated sections for men and women, and men were not allowed to enter the women's area. She also mentioned that the toilets and bathrooms were separated by gender. Kazunari was surprised to see how strictly these boundaries were maintained at the Kawaii residence. Not long after, Shizuru joined the conversation and made a remark that felt a bit inappropriate. Kazunari thought that someone like Shizuru could be troublesome if left living among the female residents. Sumiko reassured him not to worry, mentioning that there were plenty of precautions in place throughout the building. Shizuru, on the other hand, assumed that Kazunari had accepted the situation and said he would try not to bother him anymore, though his attitude still felt strange. Kazunari clearly did not like it and seemed annoyed. Later, Kazunari called his mother to complain about having a roommate since he had specifically asked to live alone. His mother blamed him for being too picky, reminding him that he was the one who insisted on moving out in the first place. Kazunari argued that she had not shown him enough care. His mother told him to stop complaining, pointing out that the boarding house offered a big discount and even provided breakfast and dinner. She also warned that she would stop sending him money if he kept protesting. After ending the call, Kazunari realized that what his mother said made sense. Even though the building was old, he liked its atmosphere. He then found himself wondering where Ritsu's room was. As he walked toward the women's area, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, Sumiko suddenly called out to him. Feeling awkward, Kazunari quickly explained that he had no intention of peeking. Sumiko simply smiled and invited him to have some tea. She explained that the room they were in served as a shared dining area for all the residents. Kazunari became nervous when Sumiko mentioned Ritsu's name. Shizuru commented that Ritsu was not easy to approach. Sumiko apologized for only giving advice without doing much to help. She explained that Ritsu was her nephew's granddaughter and described her as a kind person, even if she was hard to read. Sumiko hoped Kazunari could become close to her, but also reminded him not to get stuck in a one-sided friendship. After taking a bath, Kazunari noticed Ritsu walking down the hallway while reading a book. As she was about to pass through the common area, she seemed to notice him watching her. Kazunari felt happy just seeing her soft hair and wished he could get closer to her. Suddenly, Shizuru appeared and asked why Kazunari did not have a mattress in his room. Kazunari explained that his parents had not prepared one for him. Shizuru casually suggested sharing a sleeping space since the night was cold, but Kazunari immediately refused. Their conversation turned awkward, and without thinking, Kazunari made an embarrassing remark. At that moment, he realized Ritsu was looking at him with clear discomfort. He tried to explain himself, but things only got worse. Without noticing, he had stepped into the women's area again, and Ritsu reacted by firmly pushing him back out. Kazunari's ideal was to live peacefully and comfortably, but he quickly realized that life at the boarding house was far from that. The next morning, Shizuru acted dramatically, only to be startled when Kazunari suddenly opened the curtain. Shizuru did not expect to have such a sensitive roommate, while Kazunari insisted that he was the one at a disadvantage. Shizuru then asked if Kazunari ever indulged in daydreams, which Kazunari firmly denied. Shizuru found it surprising that Kazunari never imagined situations where someone might show interest in him. Shizuru also noted that Kazunari seemed to be adapting quickly and believed he would soon get along with everyone at the Kawaii residence. Kazunari agreed that getting close to Sumiko seemed easy, but felt that becoming close to Ritsu would be difficult. Ever since the incident, Ritsu avoided making eye contact with him. She even ignored him at school. Kazunari had never seen her smile, and her distant attitude felt overwhelming. Shizuru, however, found Ritsu's intense gaze exciting, comparing it to the feeling he got when talking to Mayumi and Sayaka. Curious, Kazunari asked who they were. Shizuru explained that Mayumi worked as an office employee, while Sayaka was a college student. Shizuru then showed Kazunari a photo of Mayumi. It was instantly captivated. Mayumi really did look charming, and Shizuru started to think that Kazunari's hopes might actually come true. Suddenly, Sumiko asked Shizuru to go buy some fish. Shizuru, in an odd request, asked Sumiko to scold him while giving the order. Sumiko did so bluntly, telling him to go buy the fish in a harsh tone. Unexpectedly, Shizuru seemed delighted by it. Kazunari thought that at least one of his wishes had come true. He was living with the type of woman he liked, even if reality was not quite as ideal as he had imagined. Not long after, he noticed a well-endowed woman drinking by herself. She looked heartbroken, trying to throw away a ring. Her name was Mayumi. She shouted angrily about Kenji, calling him a terrible guy. Kazunari found it surprising that someone would react like that after a breakup. Mayumi kept venting, saying she would remind Kenji of his mistakes someday and expose his embarrassing side. Kazunari wanted to leave, but he could not just ignore her when she seemed to be in danger. He warned her not to stand too close to the edge by the sea. When he finally saw her face clearly, he felt like he had seen her somewhere before. Mayumi looked at Kazunari and assumed he was trying to hit on her, which he quickly denied. She then became upset, thinking that even someone younger was not interested in her. Frustrated, she acted as if she might jump, but Kazunari grabbed her hand to keep her safe. He corrected himself, admitting that she was attractive, but that he simply was not her type. That only made Mayumi more irritated as she misunderstood his words. Kazunari tried to clarify and asked her not to jump to conclusions. Mayumi grew more unstable, but then suddenly said she was hungry and wanted a simple egg and rice meal. She gathered her empty cans but forgot her suitcase. She also mentioned that she wanted Sumiko's cooking. Kazunari picked up her suitcase while taking the cans from her. Mayumi called him a kind person and hugged him playfully. Just as things were getting awkward, Ritsu suddenly appeared and knocked Mayumi on the head. Kazunari was surprised by Ritsu's sudden arrival. Mayumi brushed it off, saying she had only been teasing Kazunari. Ritsu could smell alcohol on her breath and warned Kazunari not to get too close to Mayumi when she was drunk because she tended to act unpredictably. Kazunari thanked Ritsu, but then Mayumi suddenly lost her balance near the stairs. Kazunari worried she might fall on him. Seeing this, Ritsu quickly positioned herself below to catch her, but Mayumi stopped herself, saying she had already suffered enough and did not want to make things worse. Ritsu scolded Mayumi, and in the commotion, Mayumi slipped. Ritsu tried to hold her, but they both ended up falling onto Kazunari. When they finally returned to the boarding house, Sumiko scolded Mayumi for getting drunk carelessly outside and also reminded Ritsu to be more careful. She pointed out that they were lucky Kazunari had been there. Kazunari began to think that Mayumi's photo really did not match her real personality. Mayumi blamed Ritsu for hitting her earlier, while Ritsu nearly retaliated by throwing a dictionary at her. Sumiko raised her voice, telling them to stop arguing. She wondered why Mayumi still acted this way, since she had thought Mayumi might settle down after getting a boyfriend. She also noted that Mayumi's vacation was supposed to last one more day. Mayumi broke into tears and explained that her partner had betrayed her, even though she had trusted him. Sumiko commented that Mayumi seemed to have bad luck when it came to relationships. Shizuru added that, at least this time, it was a slight improvement compared to her past experiences. Annoyed, Mayumi hit Shizuru. They then sat down to eat dinner together, enjoying Sumiko's egg and rice dish. Kazunari found it odd, remembering that Sumiko had earlier told Shizuru to buy fish. Mayumi really enjoyed the meal, and Ritsu felt relieved to see her in better spirits. Meanwhile, Kazunari looked like he was in pain while chewing. Ritsu apologized to him, and Kazunari realized that she was not as indifferent as she seemed. Out of nowhere, Mayumi made a joking remark as a way of apologizing, which caught Kazunari off guard. Ritsu immediately reacted by hitting Mayumi again, stopping her from taking the joke any further. On a day off, Kazunari had breakfast with the residents of the Kawaii boarding house. That day, Sumiko was heading out with her friends. She asked if anyone already had plans for the weekend. Kazunari said he did not have anything going on. Ritsu planned to spend her time reading. Shizuru wanted to withdraw all her savings and dramatically lament being broke, and Mayumi intended to watch horror movies while venting her frustrations about couples going on dates. Before leaving, Sumiko reminded everyone not to do anything strange while she was away, and she firmly prohibited drinking at the boarding house. She even warned that she would raise the rent if anyone caused trouble. Sumiko specifically asked Ritsu to report everything to her, since Ritsu was her nephew's daughter. Kazunari quickly added that he would not take responsibility for his roommate's behavior. Later that day, Kazunari felt bored. He did not have a motorcycle or enough money to go anywhere. Ritsu often spent her time at the library, so he rarely saw her. He asked Shizuru what she was working on, but she simply said it was a secret. Kazunari decided not to push further, which surprised Shizuru, who wondered why he was not more curious. Feeling like he needed something to do, Kazunari listened as Shizuru invited him to play with glycerin, but he declined. Shizuru then suggested he invite Mayumi, convinced she would be interested. Kazunari went to grab a drink and glanced toward Mayumi's room. Suddenly she crawled out in a way that startled him, making him shout in surprise. Mayumi seemed confused that Kazunari did not ask what was wrong, even though she clearly looked distressed. Kazunari told her it would be easier if she acted in a more understandable way, especially since they were in the women's area and he did not want to get into trouble again. Mayumi could not understand why he worried about something so minor. Kazunari admitted he had no idea what was bothering her. He found it strange that she was not enjoying her day off, since weekends were usually when couples spent time together, something she clearly felt she was missing. Mayumi grew more discouraged, saying no man seemed interested in her, and wondering if something was wrong with her. Kazunari became irritated by her rambling and assumed she was acting out of frustration. Mayumi, in turn, was upset that she could not enjoy her holiday. Kazunari mentioned that Shizuru was planning to experiment with glycerin and thought Mayumi might enjoy it. Mayumi doubted it, saying Shizuru would be the only one having fun, and questioned why they should go along with her ideas. She even remarked that someone as eccentric as Shizuru could still take advantage of Kazunari's willingness. Mayumi assumed Kazunari must think she was pathetic. She also pointed out that he had ignored her earlier request for attention, which only made him realize how troublesome she could be. At that moment, Shizuru called him over to look outside. It turned out she was making soap bubbles. They were amazed at how large the bubbles were. Apparently, she had simply mixed glycerin with detergent. Shizuru invited them to join, and Mayumi quickly became enthusiastic again, her mood lifting as she played. Shizuru even managed to create an enormous bubble. Ritsu had just returned and was surprised to see the three of them playing together. Mayumi admired the beauty of the giant bubbles, but one suddenly popped. She grew gloomy again, saying that the beauty and joy had only been temporary. Kazunari became more annoyed hearing her complain. Shizoru suggested they just make more, but Mayumi snapped and lashed out verbally. Instead of being upset, Shizoru thanked her, clearly enjoying the attention in her own unusual way. Kazunari could only conclude that both of them were equally eccentric. Soon, Mayumi was smiling again as they continued playing. Her cheerful expression made her look much more attractive. Suddenly, they noticed Ritsu still standing nearby. Kazunari invited her to join, but she ran off. He wondered if he had said something wrong, especially since it had seemed like a perfect chance to spend time with her. Not long after, Ritsu returned and said she wanted to read her book there. Kazunari felt nervous just being near her. Mayumi commented that Ritsu could be difficult to deal with. Kazunari encouraged Ritsu to join them since there were plenty of bubbles. This time she agreed and began playing with them. Ritsu seemed to enjoy the shimmering bubbles surrounding her. When one suddenly popped and some of the solution reached her mouth, she reacted in surprise. Curious, she stuck out her tongue slightly to check the taste, only to find it bitter. Kazunari quickly looked away, flustered by the moment. Ritsu's face turned red and shyly she asked if they could make more bubbles. Kazunari became even more embarrassed hearing her say that. Mayumi patted his back, teasing that he was making progress, while Shizoru jokingly questioned whether he could still handle himself. Annoyed, Kazunari told Ritsu to ignore the two of them. Realizing her earlier actions had caused the teasing, Ritsu blushed even more. Shizoru and Mayumi quickly ran off, leaving Kazunari alone with Ritsu, who immediately slapped him in frustration. That evening during dinner, Sumiko noticed the mark on Kazunari's face. She asked if he had been doing anything inappropriate. Kazunari could not understand why he was the one being suspected, especially since Shizoru, his roommate, refused to say anything about what had actually happened that day. The next day, Mayumi was hanging out the laundry while Kazunari stood on the terrace. She mentioned that she was not going to hang her underwear outside, even if he kept waiting around. Kazunari felt confused about why Mayumi kept seeing him as a pervert when he was simply waiting for his laundry to finish. Sumiko pointed out that it had been raining a lot lately, so she was sure Kazunari's clothes would often end up piling up. Mayumi teased him, suggesting he clean his room so it would not smell unpleasant. Kazunari told her not to bring up things like that on such a nice sunny day. Mayumi then wondered why Kazunari did not react at all when she joked about those topics. She expected at least some kind of flustered response, but he stayed completely calm. She could not figure out what kind of guy he really was. Not long after, Kazunari's laundry dried and he quickly went to collect it. While thinking about what Mayumi had said earlier, he suddenly noticed something lying in front of him. He thought it looked like a piece of clothing and wondered why it was there and who had dropped it. Slowly, he reached out to pick it up, unsure if it belonged to Mayumi or if it was some kind of trap. Just then, Shizoru showed up and Kazunari nervously asked if there were any police officers nearby. Shizoru had no idea what he was talking about. She picked up the object and revealed that it was actually just a hair tie. Right after that, Mayumi came over and said it was hers. She looked at Shizoru's outfit with curiosity. Shizoru explained that all her clothes were being washed, so she had no choice but to dress that way. Kazunari commented that she seemed to have completely lost her sense of embarrassment. Shizoru casually replied that she was still wearing shorts under the towel. Sumiko remarked that Shizoru kept lowering her standards. Shizoru then shared that back in middle school, she had been nicknamed something like a mischievous general because of her bold personality. She even joked about inviting everyone else to join her. Soon after, Ritsu arrived carrying some curtains from the hallway. Kazunari, Mayumi, and Shizoru looked quite comfortable around each other. Sumiko observed that Kazunari seemed to be adapting well to his new social environment. She asked Ritsu if she wanted to join them and then requested her help in taking down the curtains from the back room. At the same time, she asked Kazunari to help Ritsu. The two of them worked together to remove the curtains. Kazunari tried to start a conversation, asking if Ritsu liked reading since he often saw her at the library. Unfortunately, her responses were short and a bit stiff. Kazunari realized that she was probably used to being alone, which made casual conversation harder for her. After finishing, they headed to the backyard. Kazunari thought he should lighten the mood but could not think of what to say. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew through, sending a blanket flying and lifting Shizoru's clothes slightly. Kazunari joked about it as if they were witnessing a dramatic artistic moment, calling it part of the unique culture of the kawaii boarding house. Ritsu could not hold back her laughter. Shizoru even struck a playful pose, which made Ritsu laugh even harder. Mayumi was surprised to see both of them laughing so freely together. Later, they all gathered around the dining table. Sumiko asked what had made them laugh so much earlier. Ritsu quietly asked Kazunari not to explain the real reason. Kazunari simply said they had been talking about art. Sumiko felt happy because it had been a long time since she had heard Ritsu laugh that openly. Kazunari looked at Ritsu, who seemed a bit shy, and felt like he had made some progress with her. However, while walking down the hallway later, Kazunari found something that looked like a hair tie. When he picked it up, he realized it was actually a piece of clothing. At that exact moment, Ritsu hit him with a stick. The small step forward he thought he had made with her suddenly turned into a big step backward. Kazunari continued living his daily life at the Kawaii boarding house. One day, Mayumi suddenly pinned him down and invited him to watch a horror movie together. Unexpectedly, Shizuru joined in and ended up on top of him as well. Kazunari called out to Ritsu and Sumiko for help. Confused, he asked why Shizuru was going along with it. She explained that Mayumi had dragged her into it, though she admitted she did not entirely mind the situation because she found it amusing. Sumiko came over after hearing the noise and smiled at their antics. Mayumi apologized and said she originally just wanted to invite them to watch a movie, but when she saw them playing Othello, she ended up wanting to join in instead. Kazunari jokingly blamed Mayumi for putting him in such an awkward situation. Shizuru suspected that something had happened to Mayumi earlier, since one of her coworkers had invited her out for drinks. Mayumi brushed it off and said everything was fine, though she mentioned that her junior colleague had recently announced plans to get married. Feeling a bit emotional, Mayumi insisted on watching a horror movie together, and this time Sumiko agreed. Sumiko got everything ready before watching the horror movie by lighting some candles. Mayumi praised her for doing such a great job. On top of that, Sumiko tried to persuade Ritsu to join them. Kazunari also complimented Sumiko's effort. Ritsu turned it down and Mayumi guessed that she was just scared. But Ritsu denied it, saying it would only be a waste of time. Out of nowhere, Mayumi mentioned that in horror movies, people who walk alone are usually the first to die. Sumiko added that watching horror films could invite spirits. Hearing that made Ritsu visibly uneasy. Shizuru had already decorated the hallway, and Ritsu started to feel even more nervous, especially after Mayumi and Sumiko pointed out that her room was the farthest away and might feel unsettling. In the end, Ritsu decided to join them and watch the horror movie together. For Mayumi, the most enjoyable part of horror films was how the foolish couples always met their fate first. At that moment, Ritsu looked genuinely frightened, though she insisted she was just sleepy. Kazunari couldn't help but notice how adorable she looked when she was scared. Shizuru commented that one of the actresses in the film looked like Sayaka. Kazunari remembered that Sayaka was one of the residents at the Kawaii complex and wondered if she might be a sweet person. Kazunari asked Ritsu to watch for a moment, but she refused. He reassured her that it was just a normal scene. Wanting to confirm whether the actress really resembled Sayaka, Kazunari encouraged her again. When Ritsu finally opened her eyes, she was immediately met with a terrifying scene. Both she and Kazunari screamed at the same time. Kazunari quickly apologized, saying he did not mean to scare her. Ritsu called him a liar, and he kept apologizing over and over. Meanwhile, Mayumi suddenly thought that she might want to take revenge on Kazunari for that moment. According to her, the movie was not even that scary. Sumiko asked if Ritsu was okay, and Ritsu seemed to be holding back, clearly uncomfortable. Mayumi offered to accompany her to the bathroom, assuring her that there was nothing scary in the hallway. However, they suddenly screamed when they ran into a girl. Hearing the commotion, Kazunari and Shizuru became curious. The girl hugged Mayumi tightly and said it had been a long time since they last met, wondering why the hallway was so dark. Kazunari was surprised to see her. The girl turned out to be Sayaka. She introduced herself to Kazunari in a friendly manner. Kazunari thought she seemed like a normal girl. Sayaka admitted that she tended to be playful and liked hugging people, though she actually wanted to change that habit. Kazunari did not expect her to be so comfortable with physical closeness. Mayumi called Kazunari foolish for getting caught up in Sayaka's bothersome behavior. Sayaka apologized to anyone who found her annoying. Mayumi, still irritated, openly said that Sayaka really was a handful. She warned Kazunari not to act inappropriately. Kazunari explained that he had been surrounded by all kinds of personalities, including older men with questionable behavior, aloof girls, and girls who liked to drink. Mayumi grew even more annoyed when she noticed Kazunari getting flustered around Sayaka. In her frustration, she even joked about teaching him a harsh lesson. Sayaka then commented that Kazunari and Mayumi seemed very close. Mayumi replied that a lot had happened while Sayaka was away, and that she now considered Kazunari a close friend. Sayaka responded by asking if she was not also Mayumi's friend. Kazunari began to question again whether Sayaka was truly as normal as he first thought. At that moment, Ritsu quietly apologized, wondering if she came across as an indifferent girl. After living at the Kawaii boarding house for quite some time, Kazunari still found that Ritsu remained distant toward him. One day he invited her to walk home together, but she stayed silent. Not long after, Tagami asked Kazunari to head home together instead. Tagami pointed out that Ritsu lived in the same boarding house as Kazunari and wondered if he might be interested in her. He even said that Kazunari's taste was unusual, describing Ritsu as gloomy, antisocial, and someone who kept to herself. In reality, Kazunari was not attracted to Ritsu in that way. He simply wanted to get closer to her. When Kazunari returned to the boarding house, Sumiko told him that his delivery had arrived in the backyard. He was excited to see the bicycle he had bought with his allowance. He imagined that one day, his future girlfriend would ride along with him, enjoying the sunset together. Suddenly, Mayumi and Shizuru tried to get on the bike, and Kazunari immediately stopped them. Mayumi called him stingy, while Kazunari accused her of trying to take his bike ride. Mayumi seemed to understand that Kazunari bought the bike for that purpose and started talking about her past romance during her school days, though those memories were not very pleasant. Out of nowhere, Shizuru tied a knot in the bike's rear seat strap, making it difficult for Kazunari to undo. Sumiko mentioned that Shizuru was known for being skilled with tying and untying knots. Kazunari grew frustrated, feeling like they had ruined his dream. Not long after, Sayaka and Ritsu came home together. Kazunari felt awkward about starting a conversation with Ritsu. Sayaka suggested that starting the next day, Ritsu could ride along with Kazunari. He admitted he did not mind at all and even said the bike was meant for that. Unfortunately, Ritsu immediately ignored him when she noticed the knot on the bike's seat. Kazunari wondered why something always seemed to get in the way whenever he tried to get closer to Ritsu. Sayaka suddenly asked if he actually liked Ritsu. He denied it and explained that he only wanted to be friends since they lived in the same place and went to the same school. He also mentioned that Ritsu was enjoyable to talk to. Right after saying that, Kazunari realized he might have gone a bit too far with the compliment. He felt concerned because Ritsu was always by herself. Shizuru then asked about the last thing he had said, but Kazunari avoided the topic by going to see Sumiko. At that moment, Shizuru began to notice that every time Kazunari tried to move forward, something always got in his way. The next day, Kazunari felt happy riding his bike to school. He tried to talk to Ritsu again and offered her a ride, but she immediately refused. Hearing that, Kazunari assumed no one would want to ride along with him. He then left for school on his own. In reality, Ritsu had not meant to reject him so firmly. She actually had no issue with riding together, but she felt very embarrassed. Not long after, Mayumi and Sayaka teased Ritsu for refusing the offer. Shizuru even joked about inviting someone who would turn him down. Sumiko joined in as well, and their teasing began to annoy Ritsu. She pointed out that the boarding house actually belonged to her family, and Sumiko admitted she was only managing it since Ritsu's mother was the rightful heir. Ritsu then warned them that, as the daughter of the heir, she could raise the rent by 50%. That shocked everyone. Ritsu walked to school, still thinking about Kazunari's invitation. Meanwhile, Kazunari kept thinking about her too. He felt it was natural for her to refuse, assuming she might have misunderstood his intentions. That day, Kazunari had duty at the library. He wondered if Ritsu would be there, believing she would not expect him to show up. When he entered, Ritsu apologized for what happened earlier. She realized she had overreacted and explained that it was not that she did not want to ride with him. She simply preferred reading while walking, felt embarrassed about riding with a boy, and worried that the other residents would tease her. At that moment, she seemed unsure of what to do. Kazunari reassured her, saying he understood her reasons. Ritsu then asked him not to invite her again in the future. After that, Kazunari began to feel that whether he became close to Ritsu or not was no longer the main issue. The situation felt a bit strange to him, and he came to accept that maybe his preferences really were a little unusual. That afternoon, Kazunari was confused when he saw Shizuru squeezing Mayumi while Sumiko stepped on Shizuru in return. Mayumi was irritated because Sayaka had pointed out that she had been dumped by a guy. Sayaka insisted that it was simply the truth and even commented on Mayumi's mismatched underwear. Mayumi found it annoying that Sayaka treated her so casually despite them both being women, and she snapped at Kazunari for staring in their direction. She then realized Kazunari was actually looking at Ritsu. Kazunari walked over to Ritsu and asked what was wrong with her. Ritsu said she was fine and quickly left. Still, Kazunari was certain he had just seen her crying. At that moment, Mayumi's phone started ringing, but she refused to answer. Shizuru and Sumiko were convinced it had to be her ex calling. Not long after, Mayumi received a message from him saying he missed hearing her voice. She looked happy, but she brushed it off, claiming she only felt a little sympathy and did not expect anything more. She reasoned that since they had not talked in a long time, it was only natural for him to reach out again. Sayaka could not understand why Mayumi was so quick to feel sorry for a guy. Her phone kept ringing, and Mayumi eventually said that her ex would probably keep calling unless she picked up, so she stepped outside to answer it. Ritsu watched her, noticing how cheerful she seemed. Kazunari could not understand why Mayumi was willing to reconnect with someone who had such a bad personality. Suddenly, Ritsu said that she had started to understand something. Kazunari was puzzled by what she meant. The next morning at breakfast, Sayaka asked if Mayumi had gotten back together with her ex. Mayumi denied it and said she was just teasing him a little because he was being talkative. Shizuru suspected that Mayumi might still be getting treated poorly by him. Mayumi insisted that her ex had changed after they broke up and made it clear that she was not someone easy to take advantage of. Then her ex called again, and Mayumi quickly answered. Kazunari could barely watch, feeling frustrated that she seemed so easily pulled in. Shizuru figured that Mayumi must still have strong feelings for him. Ritsu then wondered out loud when someone truly knows it is time to give up, before heading back to her room. Kazunari found her behavior strange and briefly thought that maybe she liked someone. He quickly dismissed the idea, convincing himself that Ritsu was always alone and unlikely to be interested in anyone like that. Later, Shizuru made a rubber band gun and was sure Mayumi would like it, just like she had enjoyed the soap bubbles before.